Welcome back to Elite Math Services, where we teach you math in under 5 minutes. Today we're going over question number 17 on the Florida Teachers Exam. Here we're finding volume. So quickly, I'm just going to underline the key details that we need, which are the measurements. We have some in yards, some in feet. All right, which means we're going to have to go ahead and do some conversions. All right, so the question is, what is the volume of air in the building in cubic feet? All right, first thing we want to do is we want to cut this into two pieces and find the volume of the two pieces separately and then add them together. So the top is going to be a triangular prism and the bottom is going to be a rectangular prism. So first we're going to need some formulas. And the formula for a rectangular prism is basically length times width times height. We're going to multiply all these three numbers here. But the first thing we need to do is convert these yards into feet. All right, so 1 yard is equal to 3 feet. All right, and if we have 4 yards, all right, if we're going from yards to feet, we're getting smaller. All right, and when we get smaller, we multiply. So all we have to do is simply multiply the 4 and the 3. All right, so 4 yards is going to give us 12 feet. I'm going to put this up here in the corner so we can have space. This problem, it goes a long way. All right, so we multiply the two numbers and it gives us 12 feet. All right, so now that we have that, we can go ahead and find the volume of the rectangular prism. We're just going to multiply all three of these numbers together. So 12 times 20 times 9.5. All right, and I represent 9.5 as a decimal, 9.5. All right, you can go ahead and put this in the calculator. You'll have a calculator on the test, so you don't need to do any long multiplication. All right, just go ahead and put it in the calculator, figure out what the answer is. All right, so you multiply these three numbers, you get 2,280. All right, now that's the volume of just the rectangular prism. Now we need to find the volume of the triangular prism up at the top. All right, and that, the way we find that, first of all, the formula for that is half times the base, the length, and the height. All right, so the length is 20, right? If that bottom is 20, then the top is 20. So the length is 20. The base is going to be the bottom of the triangle. All right, and we know that is considered 12 feet, right? Because if the bottom is 12, so is the top. And then we need to find the height. So the height, all right, is basically this little space here. From the top, from the tip of that triangle to the base. All right, and so we know that this side is 9.5 and the full height is 15. We just subtract 9.5 from 15. And when you subtract that, you'll end up with 5.5. So here I'm just showing you how that's done, just in case you may not know how to subtract decimals. All right, so now that we have that, we have everything we need to multiply. But remember, the formula for a triangular prism is a little different. Once you multiply these numbers, you also need to multiply it by half or divide the number in half. All right, so you put these in the calculator. All right, 20 times 12 times 5.5. And that's going to give you 1,320. All right, you multiply that by half or divide that in half, it's going to give you 660. All right, and so now that we have the volume of the top and the bottom, you add those two numbers together, and it's going to give you your final answer. All right, so it's going to give you a final answer of 2,940 feet cube, or cubic feet.